Well, good evening, everybody. Glad to see you here, and welcome to this Wednesday night's chat. We've got a good lineup for you, and we're going to have a little bit of fun too, watching and learning. So, let's see. I've got Andrew here, of course, and David, welcome. Scott, welcome. And Maurice, welcome. Nice to have you here. Good. Now, we're going to have some people here that probably have never been here before, so I'm going to welcome them. I don't know, I don't have YouTube open up on my other computer over here, but if one of you have YouTube, you can kind of keep track of how many people are logging into YouTube because I sent the link there as well. So tonight we're simulcasting, if you want to call it that, through Zoom to YouTube and to LinkedIn. So I don't know how many people we're going to have from LinkedIn, but if you are from LinkedIn or if you are from YouTube, please don't hesitate to let us know who you are. Give us your name in the chat window and or the comments window, and let us know who you are and where you're from. It's always good to have that information, and that way you can kind of join the rest of the group that's here on Zoom. And I'm expecting a few more people to be dropping in at this point. It's going to be an exciting evening, I can tell you that. So, what's going on? Anyway, let's see. Well, as far as trivia is concerned, I'm still teaching at Mohawk, a Wednesday class. I've got three more classes to go, and then I'm done. Which, you know, it's bittersweet because it's kind of bitter because it's done, and it's sweet because finally it's done. And then I'll pick it up again probably in September. I'll probably be teaching two. Oh, no, no, that's okay. So, the class I'll be teaching, I am. Oh, the class I will be teaching is and am teaching is photo one class, photography one, but it's dual credit. So what I'm doing is I'm teaching high school students who are in grade 12 a Mohawk College course at Mohawk. And so when they graduate from grade 12, they get their grade 12 credit and they also get one college credit. So when they go to college, they'll be able to apply that credit to an elective perhaps. So it gives them kind of a leg up. And it doesn't matter which college they go to, most colleges will recognize that as a credit in Ontario. So it's kind of a cool course that way. And of course, because the students are at Mohawk College, it's cool for them. You know, they've never been to a college or in that environment, and nor the freedom that the college gives them as opposed to the high school. So it's a good course. And the other course I'm teaching is also Photography 101, but it's on Monday nights. This is a Mohawk class for its continuing education. So I get people all the way from their high teens to late 80s. So I get everything. And and that's for people that are just getting into photography and want to learn the basics and perhaps go on because the course is a credit course for a certificate. So they can get a certificate at Mohawk College that they took all the different courses that that certificate demands. So that's what I'm doing or will be doing. And I've already wrapped up the Monday night class. That went online, by the way, when COVID came in. And they asked me, do I think that the Photo One course can be taught online? And I said, of course it can. Everybody has their own camera, so there's no reason it can't be taught online. And what happened ever since then, it's always been online, and it's been very successful, I'm glad to say. So there you go. That's what I, excuse me, that's what I've been doing. So let's see. I'm just going to turn my head away for a minute and I'm going to get out of this, whatever I'm in here. There we go. And now I'm going to go to Yeah, I'm going to go to YouTube and see who's here, and then I'll get on with the program. Sorry for leaning out of the window, but my computer's way over here, and I have to sort of reach for it, the PC. I've got, let's see, how many? I've got four monitors running here, so hmm, it's just the way things set up. Go for a new window. YouTube. Yes, yes. There we go. Sorry for the slight delay, gentlemen. And takes so many clicks to find my channel. Yes, we have it, and we've got a couple of people watching there. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to close this window. I think I've got everybody that's going to be here. Anyway, let me go on to the next thing. Oh, we do have somebody from YouTube here. All right, Maurice, nice to have you here. I see you're going to be taking urban photography at Mohawk. I hope that course runs, but I got to tell you, one of the important things is that if you decide on a course, apply early. And the reason I say that is because some people wait until the last minute to apply. So if you wait till the last minute to apply, they probably canceled the course 3 days before you applied because there were no applications. So you have to apply early, and that way, if everybody applies early, the course will run. I think all they need is 5 people. That's their minimum. The course will run with 5 people. Fantastic. Yeah, at Mohawk. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm just going to move on here. I think everybody's in. All right. So let's see what's next here. Now, next week, next Wednesday night, I'm going to have Scott here, Scott Simons, and he's going to be talking about painting with light. And I'm really looking forward to that one as well, because he does some extraordinary things with light, and he'll show you how he does it, and what's involved in getting it done. And of course, Scott is not just a photographer when it comes to this, he's also a director because you have to have a performance to do this. You have to have models that are willing to hold still, and then the performance of actually doing the light. A lot of it is experimentation. So it takes a little while to get it all right, and he's going to talk about all that and the challenges and so forth. Okay, good. Yeah, Maurice, we'll keep your fingers crossed for you. Now, tonight we have Andrew McLachlan, and he's going to be talking about below the surface photography, underwater photography, and halfway under the surface and halfway above the surface photography. So I'm really interested in seeing how that works. I saw some of his work earlier when we did a little bit of a rehearsal for this evening, and I'm telling you, he's got some really cool shots, and he'll explain how he does them. The one thing I really found interesting, and you'll see this in one of his presentation, he took some photographs of lily pads, but the angle is from underwater up at the lily pads, and that made a big difference because you could see the lily pads, and then past that you could see the trees in the forest. So it was a bit of a different angle, and I really appreciated that. That was great. All right, now. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go down to, see, I got to get my cursor going here. Fantastic. And I'm going to introduce for you, see, we've got that, have we? Yes. So I'd like to welcome Andrew McLachlan. welcome. I'm glad you're here with us. And he's going to be
Thanks, Jorj.
talking about, yeah, he's going to be talking about his underwater photography techniques. And if you hang in there, you'll get a lot of information on the kind of equipment he uses, and of course, everything that is going to come up. Now, you can see Andrew's bio in on my Facebook page as well as on YouTube. So have a read at that. Make sure that you get some information on Andrew, and he also does um, a little bit of teaching and as well as excursions. I have to mention excursions because Andrew, you're going to be leading an excursion to Lake Superior, and that link, by the way, is in YouTube and it's also on my Facebook page. I've kind of broadcast that link so that, and of course on Andrew's page, so that if you're interested in having a look at that, by all means, have a look. I think there's a couple of places left that he wants to fill, and it's going to be an exciting tour, I'm quite sure, for those of you who are adventurous outdoor photography buffs. And let me see here. What else do I need to talk about? Oh, yeah. Okay. So now, um, let me go down here. And I just wanted to give you a little bit about Andrew. So let's see. I'm just going to magnify that. So Andrew is a photographer. Of course, he's based in Ontario, as you can probably see that, and specializes in landscape, wildlife, and underwater photography. And he's had a deep-rooted appreciation for the world that feels both immersive and authentic. So his underwater photography offers perspectives that the viewers very rarely see or experience, and that's life beneath the surface of the water. And he's traveled extensively throughout Ontario and beyond to build a diverse collection of imagery in addition to his photography, and also these photographic workshops that I just talked about and guided photography tours, helping others develop their skills while experiencing inspiring locations. There's nothing like getting training and experience while you're on location in the good places. And Andrew is also a featured speaker at events, camera clubs, and he shares his expertise and creative insight willingly with all of us. So that's something to keep in mind. So, with that, I'd like to introduce Andrew. Welcome. And we're going to get started. Unless you've got something to say as an introduction, Andrew? Anything?
No, just thanks so much for asking me to be on the show tonight, Jorj. Greatly appreciated, and looking forward to talking about underwater photography and that, and maybe inspiring other people to want to look at, exploring that themselves. Because with underwater photography, I think there's a bit of a misconception that you have to have, your scuba diving certification, expensive scuba diving equipment. But in this presentation, I think all but maybe one or two pictures were done through snorkeling or wearing chest waders. The
Hmm.
other two couple of pictures would have been done while scuba diving because they're quite at depth. But a lot of them are, in shallow water that's, within the first 5 feet maybe of lakes or oceans.
Okay, yeah. There's not much scuba diving in 5 feet of water.
No,
Okay, so
no.
with that, let's get started. Here you go, Andrew.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, tonight, folks, I'll talk a little bit about wildlife in the underwater realm. Photoshop, and he really simplifies it all down to these just a couple of clicks with buttons and stuff to get yourself going. I don't use it to its full capacity. I will use some of the actions he has built in there. Some will add a little bit of subtle color enhancements to the warm tones. There's a painting contrast feature that I use quite frequently, which is more of a dodging and burning, but you can paint in the contrast with a black brush, a neutral brush, a white brush, or you can actually pick a color in the image and use that color as a contrast brush just to maybe bump one of the colors in the scene just a little bit more. So I think if someone can make masks and action panels like this and sell it for a mere $29 US, I'm going to grab it because that simplifies my workflow quite a bit. And the same fella, Tony Kuiper, he also has created these camera-specific linear profiles. And these are completely free to download off his website. And he's got them for almost every digital camera made so far. And he says on there, if you don't see your camera, if you send him a couple of pictures, he'll create a profile for that camera. But what I find out, I mean, you can always click, copy the link there and check out his little article on the luminosity masks, but, or sorry, the linear profiles. I find that you get a little more leeway with the sliders working with these camera-specific linear profiles. They're accessed when you're in Adobe Camera Raw for optimizing your pictures. And I find when I do the tweaking using these linear profiles and then go to Photoshop, I'm really only doing minimal changes to what I need to do. And then I'm saving that image as an 8-bit TIFF and ready to send to clients if it's needed for magazines or calendar submissions, that type of a thing. The one thing I noticed with these linear profiles, and I did some testing a while ago, you know, like with a picture of just a black-capped chickadee, and the whites on the chickadee on the back of the camera the camera said it was completely blown out. And we all know that, you know, the camera doesn't give us an accurate representation of the picture when the, you know, with the blinky saying what's blowing out and that sort of a thing. So when I took that picture and put it into Camera Raw, those blown out highlights on the chickadee weren't quite so bad. But as soon as I activated the linear profile, there was nothing wrong with the whites in that chickadee at all. And I was able to completely recover all the detail in those whites. Yet on the back of the camera, it was saying that, you know, the picture's toast, you might as well delete it because it's just too overblown. So I think you have a little more leeway with recovering the highlights as well with the linear profiles, because they strip the image down to its very basic raw ingredients, and then you kind of build it back up again. So what I'll do here, I use Olympus system, the OM system, and I don't have all the lenses that I use. I left out the end lenses that I would use for my topside work, like you know, 100 to 400, that type of thing, because you don't use those lenses underwater. So what I have two OM1 cameras. I use the 8mm fisheye lens, 8 to 25 millimeter lens, and the 3 macro lens, 30 to 60 and the 90. My favorite lens to use, especially here in Ontario, is the 8mm fisheye lens. In the Cayman Islands, I found the 8 to 25 millimeter lens was a little more favorable because it gave me a little bit more of a zooming range if I wanted to zoom in on some fish that were maybe a little bit skittish and harder to approach. I find here in Ontario, with the clarity of our water, the 8mm fisheye lens is much more preferable because I've got to get close to something for the clarity, and the 8mm fisheye lens lets me get very close to subjects. I use that, my camera system, in AOI housings. That's Asia Optical Industrial is what that stands for. I use their housings, their dome ports and macro ports, as well as their strobes. And I find they're, you know, affordable and very reliable. I used the OM1 housing for 2 years straight in the Cayman Islands without any issues, and came back and continue to use them. Some of the benefits that we find with snorkeling for underwater photography: one, will have more time for photography. When you do scuba diving, you're limited to the amount of time you can based on the air in your tank and decompression limits. So you can, if you go down deep, you're going to have a lot less time. If you scuba dive into, say, just 10 feet of water, you'll have more time than you would if you go deeper. But with snorkeling, you essentially have unlimited time to work on your photography. You can enter the water faster and exit the water faster because you're not bogged down with heavy scuba gear. You can explore these shallow habitats a lot easier by just having, you know, a snorkel and mask and fins and your camera and just meandering through the aquatic plant life or sunken logs and that sort of thing. So the less gear gives you greater mobility under the water. Snorkeling, when you're shallow, you have a lot more options for ambient light photography. And I do some ambient light photography here in Ontario for just underwater landscapes. And because you're closer to the surface when you're snorkeling, you'll get a little bit more dramatic light effects coming off the surface, such as, the sun rays penetrating down into the water and that sort of thing. So we'll quickly look at the AOI housing. This is the one that I use, and you can see on the back of the housing, you have buttons to access all the buttons on your camera that you need to. The only thing the AOI housing does not have is a button to access the joystick on the back of the OM1. But if you just set up your focus points to be controlled by the arrow pad, then you have an arrow pad on the back of the housing, and you can easily move your focus points around if you need to. So that's really beneficial. And I set up my OM1 to certain buttons do certain things, because you can custom program all the buttons. And that will allow me to easily access features underwater without having to scroll through menus to find that feature I maybe want to activate. The two strobes that I use, if I use the Q1RC strobe, I have a pair of those. And if I use the Ultra Intelli P1 strobe, I have a pair of those as well. The P1 strobe is a much larger strobe, and I quite enjoyed using those in the Caribbean. I do use them here in Ontario sometimes, but I find for some of the smaller subjects, and especially macro, I tend to gravitate to the Q1RC strobe because it's a much smaller strobe, easier to maneuver around while taking your pictures. And the AOI strobes are set up quite well to work with the RC mode on the Olympus cameras for near perfect TTL exposures. The one thing with the Ultra Intelli P1 strobe, because AOI have started making housings for Sony cameras, they've also incorporated the Sony TTL into the P1 strobe. And I do think there is a newer model of the Q1RC strobe that also incorporates that Sony TTL feature as well. Here's a quick look at the housing. I have a fisheye lens on there, and that's a mini dome, so a 4-inch glass dome. And normally I have another picture coming up that'll show you the full setup with strobes. But you can just see this is very compact. And having a fisheye lens in a mini dome allows you to do a lot of close focus wide angle work with subjects, because the fisheye lens focuses down to about 4 to 5 inches, so you can get really close on subjects. And even if the subject is fairly large, you can still get close and fit the whole subject in the frame, really. Okay, so here's a setup using the big P1 strobes. Again, this is the housing with the fisheye and the 4-inch mini dome. I've got the housing attached to a tray, so I've got the handles I can hold the housing with, and then some strobe arms with some flotation device. And that's just to get the flotation devices to help get that housing a little bit more neutral in the water. So, it's not floating to the surface or sinking down to the bottom. You want it to kind of fairly neutral, so if you let go of it, it'll just kind of float there and won't go up or down or drift away. And then here's the exact same setup, but now I've got the smaller Q1RC strobes. So you can see how much smaller those strobes are in this setup compared to the strobes in the previous setup. And that's why I find this setup is very convenient for especially chest waders working in very shallow water, weedy environments with a lot of debris, logs and sticks around if I'm working on toads or frogs and stuff. It's just easier to be able to maneuver that around that type of environment than having the big heavy strobes. So the basic strobe position when we're using the strobes, when I'm using them in a fisheye lens, I'll typically have those strobes. You can see they're pulled quite a ways back from the lens. And if you follow the beams of light coming out, you can see how the beams of light are not, they're not really in front of the lens. I'm sort of angling those out so that they're going to hit that fish. first. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to really light that water column between the lens and the fish. If we do that, any particulate matter in the water is going to be illuminated as little bright specks, and we call that backscatter. There is a program now called Backscatter Exterminator that runs as an action and will do a very good job at cleaning up any backscatter in the image. And I have used it several occasions for images where I have to, because there's just far too much turbidity in the water and you can't get the backscatter out. But the main goal is to position your strobes in such a way to minimize that backscatter. So proper strobe placement, and you should be able to illuminate subjects without any backscatter in the picture, or very minimal of it. If I was doing macro work, I would pull those strobes in much closer to the housing, because there's going to be very little water in macro between the lens and the subject, so you want to get your light on that subject. And also, when using a fisheye lens, if I'm shooting something from a little bit distance away, maybe 3 feet or so, I'm going to pull those strobes a little further away from the housing. But if I'm going to do close focus wide angle, I'm going to pull those strobes in closer to the housing, because what we want to do is we want to minimize any shadow in front of the lens, which can happen if I'm photographing turtles up really close and I have those strobes out far. Then the turtle's face is going to be in shadow. So by pulling those strobes in closer to the lens, or the housing, sorry, we'll end up lighting the nose of that turtle properly. So we'll take a look at some of the actual pictures now. So here we are with Grand Cayman, just a common octopus. I encountered him just on the iron shore in the west end of Grand Cayman, and he was quite well camouflaged. But I saw him just hanging on the side of the iron shore, and I thought, I'm going to have to get up there slowly to get him, and be careful, because he's probably not going to stay for very long. He's quite exposed, so as soon as he realizes I see him, he's going to take off and go straight to his den. So I approached slowly and slowly, and then I got to a point and fired a couple of frames, and this was the only frame that turned out, because you can see he's kind of in a position where he's getting ready to launch off of that rocky shore right away. And he did. He launched off, went around the corner, and straight into his den and disappeared. So some of it you gotta work kind of quickly. So I sort of figured, I knew where he was. I knew about how close I might be able to get. So I positioned my strobes how I thought they would work best. Had shutter speed, everything all set up, and just slowly, just kicking my fin, slowly moved my way in and fired off a couple of frames. Here we are with the green sea turtle and a couple of little barjacks. This is down Grand Cayman as well. Shallow water, about 4 or 5 feet of water. And in these situations, I find I would do a lot of blind shooting. And that would be, I would do a little bit of a duck dive down and get as close to the bottom as I could. And then I would just extend my arms out and hold the housing right on the bottom of the ocean, looking straight at the turtle. And this is ambient light. And when I would do the turtles with ambient light, I would just set the OM1 to 20 frames a second. And while holding my breath and holding the camera on the ocean floor, then I could just fire several frames away at 20 frames a second, and then just kind of move the camera around a little bit to just sort of different positions of the turtle within the frame. But with a fisheye lens and the mini dome, as long as I sort of had that turtle's head somewhere in the middle of that dome, generally the pictures turned out very well, with no clipped flippers on the turtles and that sort of thing. This one here is some tubulate sponge. This was done near the USS Kittiwake dive site. The Kittiwake is just behind me. And on the reef here, these tubulate sponge, they were pointing straight down to the seabed. And what I did here using the fisheye lens, again, this was a shooting blind technique, because I couldn't get under the tubulate sponge because there was only about, maybe 8 inches between the sponges and the sandy floor of the ocean. So I just held the camera on the seabed looking straight up towards the tubulate sponge and the surface. and then fired off a few frames. And just by shooting blind like that, and then checking the images I got, then I could just tweak where I would hold that camera to grab those shots. I always like doing the stingrays at sunrise at Stingray City in the sandbar and North Sound of Grand Cayman. And this shot, it's a fairly high ISO shot, about ISO 800, and strobes under the water. There's a lot of contrast that we're dealing with here because the sun's just coming up. Under the ocean is still very dark. And using I used a fisheye lens, but this time I used it in an 8-inch dome. That allowed me to have better control over that meniscus of the water. Just a little bit overall easier to work with the fisheye in the larger dome for a split shot like this. And then the strobes were down low, on just the light under the water, nothing above. Exposed for the highlight, so I was exposing for the sky, but then letting the strobes light up underneath the water. And I quite like the way this one turned out with, a couple of stingrays moving through. I wish that main stingray, his tail hadn't been cut off. He may have had a close call with a hammerhead shark because they will move through the area. They do feed on stingrays. One of the last pictures I made while I lived on Grand Cayman was in March of last year, early March of 2025, early March. Loggerhead sea turtles. I hadn't gotten any pictures of those in the 2 years I was there. And then just as we were getting ready to move off island, one male had showed up early for the breeding season because they only come to the island for breeding. And we encountered this very large male, maybe 4 feet long from head to tail. And so we encountered him twice, and I was able to get a lot of nice pictures of him. This is one of my favorite ones of him with the fisheye lens. And we got the sun right above us too, coming down through the water. Here's another ambient light shot that was done with green sea turtle. This was recently used in a calendar. And this was actually done with the McLachlan 7-14 lens. This is one of the first lenses I used underwater. And then I gravitated more to preferring the fisheye lens. So this one here is just same spot as the previous turtle over a seagrass bed. It's a little bit rough in the ocean on this day. And you can see a bit of the turbulence on the surface. But we can see how the blue sky and the white clouds are coming through. Just some real beautiful turquoise colors. Another split shot. This was done with the 8-25 millimeter lens in an 8-inch dome. And I really like the way the ocean has eroded the rocks here at this spot. Nice and smooth, and the lines radiating out into the ocean. Water was not very deep at all, maybe about 5-6 inches deep. And I just sat down on the rocks and just, played around with various compositions, moving the camera up and down. And what I'll do to try and keep water droplets off of the dome for the portion that's topside, sometimes I would use lemon pledge on the dome if it's an acrylic dome. Sometimes spit. Sometimes I would even try using cut a potato and just rub the potato on it and then rinse that off. And the starchy juice in the potato will sometimes help keep the water droplets from forming. Now I'll use those on acrylic domes. Excuse me. I have a couple of glass domes now, a 4-inch and an 8-inch. So what I will use on the glass domes, I'll use a little bit of Rain-X, just rub that on, and that'll just help the water bead off quicker and run away. So you're not going to get too many droplets on that top side portion of the picture. Sometimes you get a couple of spots here and there, and then you can clean them up, clone them out, that sort of thing. This one here, a nice moray eel. He had backed himself up into a bit of a corner. There was no real way out of this little spot he had backed himself into. And I moved in to get a shot of him. And moray eels breathe through their mouth, so they quite often have their mouth open. If you get a little bit too close, then they're going to open their mouth up more into a little bit of a threatening pose, try to show you all the teeth they've got and scare you off. And that's sort of what this one here is doing. He's just giving me a little bit of a threat with the more open mouth. And now that I've moved back to Ontario, we'll go shares during the salmon run last October. And this one here, I wore a wetsuit for this shot, and I didn't really need to. It could be done with chest waders because the water was only about 10 inches deep here. But the one thing, it's my first time shooting the salmon, but the one thing I quickly learned is, when you see the salmon running up the rivers and there's just hundreds of them in the river, you think this is going to be like shooting mice in a barrel. But as soon as you get into that river anywhere near them, they all just kind of scatter. The trick to photographing the salmon is finding the ones that they're quite exhausted from doing their run, and they're just kind of holding their position while they rest up. And those are the ones that you can easily approach and get lots of pictures of. I was able to get some really nice pictures of this one, some verticals, some horizontals. And using that fisheye lens in the 4-inch mini dome, I was able to get that lens within a couple of inches or so of this salmon. So the clarity in this, because the clarity of the river was not good at all. As you can see, looking out behind the salmon, it's quite, the visibility is not good. But by getting that fisheye lens in within a couple of inches, the clarity is just improved so much. And then the use of strobes to add some light just really makes that salmon pop in that picture. And the 4-inch mini dome, although it's a little trickier to do split shots, over-under shots with, it's not impossible. So just a little bit of practice, and it's quite easy to do the split shots. Here's the water lily picture that Jorj was talking about in the intro. This is another example of shooting blind. I couldn't swim under the lily pads to shoot up because I'd disturb all those stems with the leaves, and you wouldn't be able to see what was going on. So by holding the camera out under the lily pad leaves and shooting straight up, and using the strobes to light the undersides of the lily pads really made the reds pop on those lily pads and give us a really neat perspective looking up from underwater and up to the forest and sky. This was done not far from my home on a little spot called Eels Creek. It's in the Kawartha area. And this picture here is from the exact same creek. I did this in early spring this year, and there was the creek was mostly frozen over, but there was a few open sections in the creek. And those open sections were allowing bubbles to go underneath the ice and get trapped in certain areas of the ice. So what I was able to do, I was wearing chest waders, and the creek is shallow. I was able to kneel down in the creek and hold the camera out underneath the ice shelf and point it straight up towards those bubbles. I used ambient light, did not use strobes for this one. And I was able to create this kind of neat abstract of all these bubbles trapped under the ice, looking up toward a clear blue sky. The same creek, Eels Creek, I explored that last summer and came across a few nice sized bass in the creek. And I was able to, using the fisheye lens, this scene here, the clarity in the river, it's pretty good clarity, but there's still some visibility issues at times. But some of those visibility issues with debris and algae blooms in the water and that, they can help create an environment where those sun rays will really become accentuated. And that's what happened here in this picture. And for this one here, what I was doing, I was in maybe about 3 feet of water in the creek. There was a lot of logs around. So I was able to, while snorkeling, I was just able to reach down, grab one of the logs, and pull myself down and just hold me down there for about 20, 30 seconds, and then wait for the bass to move in a little bit closer. Since I was upstream of the bass would be mostly facing me because they're going to face into the stream of the water. So by using that handhold and pulling myself down, I was able to stay fairly steady in the moving water of the creek and create some of these images of the bass. This one here was just created this spring in a small beaver pond where frogs and toads and salamanders were coming to breed. And I wanted to do some over-unders of the frogs and toads this year. So I'd found this one American toad, and using that 4-inch, the fisheye in the 4-inch mini dome, and those small Q1RC strobes, because as you can see under the water, there's a lot of debris, and big heavy strobes might be problematic to position those. So by using the smaller setup and just a pair of chest waders and just kneeling down in front of the toad, I was able to create a few different frames of the toad. And what I would do for this is I would use the animal eye focus for the toads. On the OM1, I would just select a large focus area, select the animal eye focus, and it easily picks up the eye on the toad for capturing these images. This one here was in a creek called the Crow River, Crow River. It's near, where is it near? Campbellford, near Campbellford, Ontario. And this is a virile crayfish. It's a native crayfish to Ontario. There is a lot of invasive species of crayfish in Ontario now, but this one is native. And this one was quite big, about 5-6 inches long. So that's a pretty big crayfish. I remember being a kid, most crayfish you find are, maybe that big, but this guy he was a good size. And he was out and about during the day. Crayfish are quite often nocturnal, but this guy was out during the day. And because of his large size, the close focusing distance of that 8mm fisheye lens, and that mini dome, because this was a very rocky environment. If I had an 8-inch dome, I would have a very hard time getting that dome port into position to get a photograph of the crayfish. But that mini dome, much more smaller, easier to fit into places to work some of these images. And a couple of strobes added some nice light onto that crayfish. Here's another one from this spring, common snapping turtle. He was out and about. Snapping turtles will usually show up to the vernal ponds and beaver ponds in the springtime because they're looking for the frogs and toads to eat, as well as their eggs. So this guy, he had arrived and he was on the prowl for something to eat, the frogs, toads, or the eggs that they would be laying. And I was able to get that fisheye lens into the water in front of them and just using chest waders, getting a nice underwater image of them. So, as I was saying, a lot of these underwater wildlife images that we can be creating, we don't need to have scuba gear or even really snorkel gear sometimes. Chest waders is sometimes all it needs if we know where to look and get these images. And here's another picture of the same turtle, same snapping turtle, but this one here, the debris in the pond is stirred up a bit, creating what would be backscatter in the image. But in this image here, I think that really it creates an atmospheric look to this image because snapping turtles, they don't always live in crystal clear waters. Some of them will just bury themselves right in the mud right in front of you. So I really like this picture for the debris in the water, creating that atmospheric look. And it's a little bit more of a headshot of them using, again, that 8mm fisheye lens in the 4-inch mini dome. Something I did this past winter, which was quite interesting, is photograph mud puppies. And mud puppies are cool. They're our largest salamander in Canada. These guys get to about 12 inches, fully aquatic all the time. You can see they got the gills on them. But the interesting thing about them is winter is one of the best times to photograph them, January or February. They're out and about in these rivers at night, prowling for aquatic larvae, hibernating frogs, crayfish, that type of stuff. And this was in a very turbid river where I had photographed them. There was a fairly large opening in the river beneath a bit of a waterfall. And it was a great place to find them. And I was able to just, the strobes, you can turn the lights on the strobes that are continuously on. And I would use that as my way to look for them. And that would also act as a focusing light as well. So when I would find a good mud puppy, they're in shallow water, 10, 12 inches of water. Then I could, again, shoot blind, because this is winter. I'm not going snorkeling in water that's just a degree above freezing. So what I would do is using chest waders, I would locate them, and then I would just, somewhat blindly, I could see where the mud puppy was. but I would just submerge the rig into the water, onto the riverbed in front of the mud puppy, and fire off a few frames, and the strobes would illuminate the scene for those images. And that was really the way to work for the mud puppies. But what I did do, because it was winter, I made sure to keep the that 4-inch dome port. I made sure to keep that underwater, because repeatedly taking it out of the water and into the water with the outside temperatures, it would have iced over very quickly. Because as it was, my strobe arms got quite coated in ice, and I couldn't really move the strobes around if I needed to reposition them. So I made sure to keep that dome port under the water so I would not get ice forming on that. And that would wrap up the underwater images for tonight's little presentation. And then I just have this slide up here that has my website, my email address, as well as my Instagram handle if you want to give me a follow on Instagram. So if anybody has any questions at all, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic, Andrew.
Thank you.
My background is industrial commercial photography, so I haven't done much wildlife photography, but this has been an inspiration.
Thank you.
So, does anybody have any questions at all?
I have one. Yep. How do you manage to capture a macro image underwater? I'm puzzled, actually, on the depth of length of all this kind of thing, the lightings, normally on the ground we use diffusers. Underwater, how you do it so clear? Can you explain a bit?
I haven't done too much macro photography in our freshwater environments here. I've done a little bit with round gobies that are quite invasive. I did a fair bit of macro work in Cayman Islands with some of the smaller species of crabs and moray eels, that type of stuff, or some real small blennies. And I find macro photography too difficult underwater. Depending on where you are in that, you may need to have excellent buoyancy, because you can't be just reaching out and grabbing hold of anything in the water to stabilize yourself, because the reef environment is very fragile. If you can find, a dead piece of rock or something, dead coral, you can always use a couple of fingers to hold yourself steady with that while you move in and get your pictures using your other hand, sort of thing. I would quite often I would focus off the LCD screen on my camera and not look through the viewfinder when I was underwater. I just found that was a simpler way for me to do it. The use of strobes for macro photography is pretty critical. That'll give you your shutter speeds to help keep things sharp. Another thing I will do is I will set the flash to rear curtain sync for photographing fish, because if the fish are moving, if there's any blur, you want a little bit of that blur to go behind the fish, and that's what rear curtain sync will give you. Whereas with front curtain sync, you might risk getting a bit of a frontal blur on the picture, which is going to look a little funny. So yeah, using the strobes, getting in close. The thing you want to do is you really want to minimize the amount of water between the lens and the subject, because that's what will give you your clarity in the picture. If there's too much distance to shoot through in the water column, you're going to lose a lot of the details. So that's where I would, depending on the subjects I thought I might want to photograph, I would determine for the macro whether I would use my 30, 60, or 90 millimeter macro. I really took to using my 90 millimeter macro when I would want to go take, headshots of the some of the small blenny species, because their head is not much bigger than the head on a wooden match. So I would use that 90 mil OM lens for its 2 times macro capability, so I could really get it nice and tight. But I'm still close enough that I'm going to maintain that clarity of the picture. And for some
Thank you. That's interesting. Very interesting. Maybe we can meet sometime when you come to Malaysia, and I might learn some tips from you on macro.
Absolutely.
Okay, Andrew, thank you.
Okay,
I
thank
have
you.
to go. Unfortunately, I have to go. I'm working today. So thank you. It's a great presentation. Maybe we meet again next week, maybe on this channel. Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you,
okay,
Jock.
thank you. Take care.
Thank you. So David's asking, how difficult is it to focus?
Not very at all. The camera focuses just the same as it does underwater as it does topside. You know, a lot of times
And
when I'd be doing the turtles, I would quite often some of the fish I would set it to the animal eye focus. What I would find sometimes with things like moray eels, their nostrils are a little bit darker than the eye, so you got to be aware of things like that because the eye focus systems are looking for contrast. So if the nostril has more contrast than the eye, that focus system is going to gravitate towards the nostril. So in some situations, you might have to turn it off and go to a single point and get that focus point on the eye of the animal you're photographing.
okay, thank you. And Maurice is asking, what's a good disposable camera for use for beginner and water photography, as well as DIY equipment?
For disposable camera, I don't think there's really probably any that are going to yield any decent kind of quality at all. For do-it-yourself type of equipment, when I first started playing around with a little bit of underwater type photography, I'd take a 2.5 gallon aquarium and a fish net and a bucket and go to a little pond, fill it with some water from the pond, a few leaves from the bottom of the pond, and I could catch some aquatic insect larvae, salamander larvae, or some frogs, and you could photograph them in the aquarium. That's a relatively easy way to do some of that type of underwater photography, if you want to call it that. And what I would do is I would always do it right next to the pond and keep them out of the pond for as little time as possible, and then reintroduce them right back into the pond. You don't want to go and scoop them up and drive them home for 2 hours to try and do it, and then you're probably going to lose the animal. It's probably going to perish. So it's better if you're going to do that, to do it right beside the pond and then let them go as soon as you finish.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, actually, I have a couple of questions. How about that?
Okay.
All right. So, I know some of these might be pretty rudimentary, but I just wrote them down. Do you find that with some of the sea creatures or some of the even domestic underwater creatures that the flash startles them and then you only get one shot?
Some are like that. Yeah. Yeah. Quite. I find I was just out last weekend at the same creek where I got the smallmouth bass, and I saw a really nice. He's probably a good 3-4 pound smallmouth hanging under the ledge on the river bank. And I went down and I thought, okay, I'm going to try a record shot before I move in any closer. And it's that one shot that flashes and boom, he was gone. So some of them are like that. Yeah. Some are tolerant of it and then some are just not. Things like crayfish, they don't really seem too concerned about it. The funny thing with the snapping turtles, I found trying to do them underwater, they did not like the continuous lights and kept turning away and would swim away from them. Yet, before I started with the underwater photography, when I'd go to the vernal ponds to shoot the frogs and toads as they were chorusing, I'd always have a headlamp on and a little focusing light on the camera. And I think that headlight would always attract the attention of the resident snapping turtle, and he'd be coming right over and looking up out of the water to see what's going on.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, next
Yeah.
question. Uh, Generally, with any underwater equipment, of course, the seals are really important.
Yes.
Do you find that you had to perform any seal maintenance?
I don't do very much seal maintenance at all. What I do is the seal that closes up the housing once you put the camera in, I will, not every time, but I will take it out periodic. Well, I will take it out and just check it for debris every time before I close up the housing. I don't put new silicone grease on it every time. I will periodically, maybe once a month, put a bit of silicone grease on it. But what I'll do when I take it out, I will literally just like run it through my mouth and just make sure any little bits of anything, grain of sand or something, gets caught and taken off of there. And
Okay.
then when I change lens ports, if I change lens ports around often, then yeah, I'm checking those and making sure that they're clean and there's nothing on there. I have 4 cats at home, so I always diligent in making sure there isn't a stray cat hair over one of the O-rings.
Yeah, because that'll do it.
Interestingly enough, the floods on the underwater housings will happen more often in the shallow water than at depth. So it's important to pay attention to it. The housings I use, they have a wet detect system as well. So if you do get any moisture in there at all, the wet detect system will alarm, the light will go red, and then you know, okay, something's getting in there. I got to get out of the water now. And with the
Right.
Olympus cameras, I think you got a little bit of leeway because you know they are so well weather sealed, and fresh water is going to be a lot less detrimental than salt water would be. So
Yeah. Now, yeah, particularly salt water, I don't know, how do you deal with salt water if you get any on your equipment?
um,
I mean, do you
well,
rinse the equipment off after you bring it out of salt water?
yeah, what I would do with the housing, strobes, all that, what I would do before you don't even take the camera out when you're done with it for the day, but rinse it off. Or on the dive boat, we would have a big garbage can full of fresh water, and you would just dunk it in there and just let it soak for a while. And then once it's
Right.
soaking, you press all the buttons just to make sure anything that could be trapped in those buttons is flushed out by the action of pressing them.
Yeah. So that's just, um, and the reason I ask that is because sometimes this care and maintenance stuff is something that you don't usually talk about because it's so automatic for you, but
Yes.
other people it might not be so much. The,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
other question I
Absolutely.
had, you mentioned about going under the water, hanging onto a log in order to be able to stay down for a little longer.
Mhm.
Have you ever used weights to decrease your buoyancy just a little bit? Not so that you sink, but just for a little decreased buoyancy?
Not up here, I haven't. But sometimes what I would do, doing the stingrays in Grand Cayman, I would, excuse me, I would put on a good amount of weight. So the water would only be about 3, 4 feet deep. I would put on, 12, 14 pounds so that when I wanted to get onto the sandy ocean floor to get at the stingray's eye level, that, I knew I would just literally drop like a stone and be down there and
Uh-huh.
shoot them. And the water was shallow enough I could stand up, so it's not risky. Some
Right.
people do for their, when they're snorkeling for stuff like that, they will, put on maybe 4 pounds or something like that just to make themselves a little bit heavier to sink easier.
Okay. Okay. Now, there's one thing that uh, this is kind of, what should I call it? Hypothetical or even futuristic, but not really futuristic because there are things like this. But I don't
Mhm.
know if something like this would work in your case with underwater photography, and that is an external monitor that is maybe Bluetooth connected to the camera so that you have a monitor that's when you do your blind shooting, you can look at this monitor to see what you're actually looking at with the camera.
Yeah, there are some monitors available by some various companies. I can't attach a monitor to my housing. Some of the big like housings like from companies like Nauticam and that, um, they have bulkheads where you can attach a cable and a monitor to it. That's all very expensive gear. But yeah, it does allow you to, you can shoot blindly and have the monitor, maybe up out of the water and you can see exactly what you're composing. Something I'd like to look into in the future, because it would make things a little bit easier to be able to shoot off a monitor in some of those situations.
Okay. Well, just a
Mhm.
thought because I was thinking,
Yeah,
oh, it'd be cool to have a monitor. You wouldn't have to really shoot
yeah,
blind.
yeah.
Now,
Well, what I
the other
want to try this coming fall, I found a couple of good spots for spawning brown trout. Yeah, brown trout. But what I found, I could get to within about 4 feet of them, and then they would move away from their spawning site. And 4 feet underwater for that type of subject in that clarity is just, it's impossible to get a good picture. So what I want to do, and I've got a little tripod now for my housing, is
uh
I can go and set that up right beside where I know they're spawning. And on the Olympus system, you can set it up to shoot like remotely in intervals, and you can program the time between exposures. So I can easily program enough time to allow the strobes to regenerate. And it will shoot 999 pictures. And you can, I could set it up and say, okay, start taking the pictures in, 30 minutes, maybe give the fish time to move back into position. And then I can have it just, every couple of seconds fire off a frame. So
Yeah.
that may be the way to get pictures of those skittish subjects. I'll be giving that a try this fall and see how it goes.
Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I think I've got one more question, which hasn't really got anything to do with photography. Has there been on occasions when you're wearing hip waders or chest waders that you got a soaker?
Not with the chest waders. No, I've been lucky that way. I've slipped a few times, but no, never gone right down and got the soaker.
Okay, good. I
Yeah.
was just
One of
curious
the
about
biggest
that.
problems, some of the things I used to find before when I did a lot of the frog stuff, depending on the ponds you're in, sometimes they're very mucky, and
Yeah.
you might sink up to your calves in the muck, and then you're
Oh,
slowly working your way out of there because it's nighttime and no one else is around. Yeah,
well, that would be a little interesting. Let's
yeah.
see. I don't think there are any other questions. Yeah. Oh, there is one more. You mentioned about being in water with your chest waders that is very cold, 0 degrees. So, like, what were you wearing under the chest waders in order to insulate you?
All I wore, well, I had my winter jacket on, obviously.
Yeah.
I was just wearing a pair of jeans and I just put a couple of socks on, a pair of socks, and I wasn't too bad. I was in the water for maybe an hour, um, so it wasn't too bad. I guess
That's a long time. Yeah.
it is, yeah, but I guess, well, the water's, it was about 15 below when I was doing it, but the water's not 15 below.
Right.
The water's maybe sitting 2 to 3 degrees, right? So it's not like your feet are in, sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah.
So
So
I didn't find
technically,
it too bad.
yeah, technically your feet are warmer than your upper torso.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. But when I do it again, I think what I would do, because what I did find is my hands and my lower arm got very, very cold from dunking
Yeah.
into the water.
Yeah.
I think what I would do is I'd probably actually wear um, a 7 mil wetsuit top and the gloves, so that would keep my hands and arm a little bit warmer doing it that way.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, Andrew, thank you very much. I don't know if anybody
Thank
else
you.
has any questions. If anybody on Zoom here has any questions, now's the time to speak up. And of course, if you're on YouTube, just type it into the chat and Andrew will be happy to answer it. So, Andrew, if there are no other questions, I'm just going to remind people that you do these tours to go to your website and check out what you have available. And
Yeah.
by all means, if they have questions, anybody has questions about any of these tours, I'm sure you'll be happy to answer them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
Any questions at all? Need more further clarification? Yep, always happy to help you out and give you all the
okay,
details so you know what you're getting yourself into.
Great. And let's see, I don't think there's anything else, but I know there's one thing that I'm already thinking about is that in your future photography, I'd love to have you back again to show us some of your photographs.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
Andrew, thank you very much. And for the
Thank
rest
you.
of you guys, oh, we're 10 minutes over 8 o'clock, which isn't too bad. There have been times that we've been a lot longer than that,
Okay.
and people have had to leave. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to wrap this up by going to my end slates. And let's see, what have we got here? Right at the bottom. Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciate from any of the viewers here is, of course, give us a like on YouTube. That's always appreciated. And of course, subscribe. And then you'll be able to take advantage of any future presentations that will be coming up, like the one next Wednesday night with light painting. That's going to be fantastic, and we're really looking forward to that. And that's it. So, thank you very much for everybody who attended and who contributed. Love it. And here's our got to add the Canadian flag. All right. So, good night, everybody, and see you next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank you,
again.
Jorj.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you,
Thanks,
George.
Andrew. See ya.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.